If you ask, what is the most abundant protein in the human body? The protein myosin 2 is a good candidate for the right answer. The myosin protein family is made of more than a dozen different proteins, some of which you can see in this image on the right. Myosin 2 is the most prominent member of the myosin protein family. Myosin 2 is a multimeric protein. It's a dimer. It consists of two so-called heavy chains structured into a head, which you can see here, a neck domain, and a tail domain here, as well as four light chains supporting the operation of the heavy chains. The head of the myosin proteins, which you can see here, are the parts of the myosin that can bind to actin filaments. Myosin 2 is an ATPase molecule, which means that it catalyzes the hydrolysis of an ATP molecule into ADP and phosphate. So this reaction that we can see in this figure on the right breaks the bond that you can see here and that biologists call a high energy bond, but in reality this bond is only considered as high energy because it's weaker than the actual bond that will be created after the reaction at this point. As a result, this reaction shown here releases energy, and the reaction is considered as exothermic. And this exothermic reaction is coupled with a conformational change, and it generates a mechanical force. Therefore, the operation of myosin 2 has both a chemical cycle and a mechanical cycle, which are coupled. In this video, we can see how this coupling actually works out. So the mechanical cycle consists of the myosin binding to the actin filament, executing a power stroke, which is what we're seeing right now, and then unbinding, which we will see right after the ATP binds, right here. And at the same time, the chemical cycle consists of the binding of the ATP, which we saw, the hydrolysis of the ATP into ADP and phosphate, and finally in the release of an ADP as well as the phosphate group. The force generated by an individual myosin is multiplied many times in a muscle, which essentially is a large array of bundles of myosin motors and actin filaments. And we can see a structural unit of a muscle called sarcomere in the left image. Muscles contract when the myosin motors bind to the actin filaments and pull them together. The combined action of all myosin proteins that exist in a muscle results in the generation of a force that is large enough to move elements of the skeleton that are the bones, as we can see in the small animation on the right. You can picture myosin 2 as a runner that is tied to a load through a long rubber band. At each step, the runner makes brief contact with the track, propels himself or herself forward, stretches the rubber band, and pulls the load forward. And then he or she flies towards the next step. Myosins generate forces of more than 10 piconewtons, as well as displacement of the end of the linker region of about 5 nanometers. In other words, a single myosin can generate a mechanical work that is of approximately 12 kT. And when we compare that to the energy that is made available by the change in the free energy induced by the hydrolysis of an ATP molecule, which is of about 20 kT, we get an idea of how efficient myosin proteins are. Due to the combined action of myosin motors in a muscle, the resulting gliding velocity induced by the use of myosin motors is 10 times faster than the one induced by kinesin motors. As a result, the heavy chains of myosin 2 have been used by several research groups to assemble hybrid devices, where the heavy chains are adsorbed to a surface and are therefore used to propel actin filaments.